Become an elite is a dull process. Yeah. I think what a lot of people think is that they need to jump after whatever in vogue trend is out there. And anybody who's been around for a long time knows that actually the tortoise is always going to pass the hare. But at any one point, what's going to happen is there's going to be a person or a representative brand or something like that that's going to be chasing after some insane algorithmic whatever hack or tech hack or something like that. And they might catch it at the right time. But what we find is that that same person that makes that decision to chase after whatever in vogue thing is in vogue right now, like a better way to A/B test thumbnails, or hey, here's the best way to trend music, or, you know, back in my day it was like, what hashtags do I use? It's like, yo, you are just majoring in the minor here. You are so far battling in the minutia. And the reason that we do that is a few reasons. Number one is when we do things that don't seem to quite matter in the long term, we often get immediate feedback from it. You know, the short-term stuff. You can see very easily whether you tested one thumbnail against another thumbnail and one thumbnail performed better. And so you're like, oh, I'm making progress. But what you're not doing, what you're not paying attention to if you're focusing on that and spending a lot of time on that is, are you actually making better videos? Are you actually making better content? Is your product actually better? There's this story that I love about Jeff Bezos. So, you know, Bezos, obviously the head of Amazon. And back in the day, what a lot of people don't know about Amazon is that actually a lot of Amazon's profit comes from Amazon Web Services, so not from their e-commerce side, right? So Amazon Web Services powers a lot of the internet. It's just like huge database storage. And so what Bezos did back in the day to try to promote it is he went to Y Combinator, this big startup Combinator, and he pitched all of the startup founders on trying to get them to use Amazon Web Services. And he told this story, and he said he toured all of these old Belgian breweries that were 100 plus years old. And these Belgian breweries, what he found really interesting about them was that they were coming up at a time when electricity started to be available. So they were doing everything by hand, they were doing everything manual, and then electricity became available, but the electrical grid was not yet designed. So you couldn't just plug into the electrical grid. And so what some Belgian breweries did is they did the smart business thing to become more efficient is they started to produce their own electricity so that they could make more beer, so that they could make beer more efficient. But what they actually had to do at that time was they actually had to become experts at electric development. And so what happened, of course, was that, these breweries that actually took on electricity performed worse and many of them went out of business, whereas the ones who stuck with the old manual process actually did much better. Because what happens always with technology, what happens with any advantage is that eventually it becomes commoditized and democratized to the point where everybody has it available. We see this with Facebook ads right now. I mean, if you're doing ads on Meta, there's AI behind the testing thing. Like, you really don't have to be a better copywriter anymore. You really don't have to be better at choosing your images or even figuring out what audience you're targeting anymore, because the AI systems behind these ads are now so democratized and they're so easy to use that actually what matters is that downstream of the ad, your product converts better, perhaps your brand on the front means more, and you have better lifetime value. And so Bezos's argument towards this whole thing was, one thing that he noticed is that these Belgian beer makers that adopted electricity, becoming an expert at electrical development did not make their beer taste better. And so his argument was, hey, guys that are doing startups, you figuring out how to do all this database hosting is not going to make your product better. It's not going to make your beer taste better. And what I see happening a lot of the time here is I see a lot of people focusing on a lot of things that doesn't make their beer taste better. And that stuff is fine. I'm not saying that figuring out thumbnail images, figuring out trendy music, figuring out how to best entertain on the internet today, depending on what the Silicon Valley profiteers over there decide that they want you to do today based off of their algorithm. I'm not saying that that stuff can't be potentially beneficial, but it's not going to make your beer taste better. It clearly comes later in down the road. And so what are you focusing on? What are you focusing on? Google has this innovation department called X, and it's a multi-billion-dollar innovation department, and they go for moonshot bets. And the guy who runs it, his name is Astro Teller. Of course, his nickname is Astro, right? The dude who runs this like innovation department for Google. His name is Astro Teller, and he gives this. So on every single one of their documents, they have this hashtag called monkey first, hashtag monkey first. And the idea behind that is, I change it a little bit because I think that a monkey juggling fire is funnier than a monkey reciting Shakespeare. But his example is, if you're trying to get a monkey to recite Shakespeare on top of a platform, you have two jobs, right? Job number one is teaching a monkey to recite Shakespeare. Job number two is building the platform for the monkey to stand on. Now, I changed this because that's not a funny enough example for me. So my example is, if you're trying to get a monkey to juggle flaming sticks on top of a platform, you have two jobs, right? Job number one is, can you get a monkey to juggle fire? Job number two is, can you build the platform? What's interesting about this is most people will start with job number two because it feels like progress. You know you can build the platform. It might be hard, it might be expensive, it might take a very long time, but you know you can do it. You know you can figure out how to create a logo. You know you can figure out what the best camera is or microphone is. You know you can figure out how to host your website, right? But can you get your monkey to juggle fire? And so that's the idea behind hashtag monkey first. Will anybody buy your shit? Do you have something meaningful enough that somebody wants to buy? Well, you have to test and prove out that assumption first before you build all of your platforms. And so in business today, there are a number of, call them platform tasks, things like creating a corporation, figuring out the best microphone for your podcast, understanding how the algorithm works. Like, you know you can do all these things. Again, they might be difficult, they might take a long time, they might cost money, but you know you can do them. There's really only one monkey task, which is, will anybody buy your shit? Do you have something that the market wants and they're willing to pay you for? And so my opinion is that that's the hard part that most people skip over because it doesn't feel like process. And so success is a mundane exercise because it's not sexy. It's hard. It's hard. But it is quite simple. You got to test all of the assumptions first. And if those assumptions play out or they don't play out, which they might not, then you iterate on them. But you don't get distracted in all of this really addictive stuff that happens day to day that feels like progress, that feels like you're doing something moving forward, whereas really, are you making your beer taste better? Because at the end of the day, that's all that can matter. And then the other stuff perhaps comes in to amplify what you're doing. But it's not the fire, right? You got a whole bunch of kindling sitting there. You can pour as much gasoline on that thing as you want. It's just going to make a mess. You still need a spark.